Welcome back, Third Time's a Charm, episode 3 of Movies You Missed. How's it going, John?
So good. How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. Really excited to record this episode with you this week. You picked a weird one, so...
Yes, I did. The Fountain. Written by Ari Handel and Darren Aronofsky, directed by Darren Aronofsky, starring Hugh Jackman and Rachel Weisz. Have you hadn't seen it before, right?
Oh no, I'd seen it. I'd seen it a couple
you
times
had?
before.
Oh, okay.
Thank
I actually
God,
was not
too, because
sure.
I think I finally figured out the movie the fourth
Did
time
you?
around.
Oh man, that's hilarious. Okay, I actually could not remember if you had seen it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It is my favorite Aronofsky film. I know a lot of people are like,
Really?
Dream's my favorite Aronofsky.
Yeah.
No, this movie is my favorite Darren Aronofsky movie. It blows me away every time I watch it. I cry every time I watch it.
Yes.
It's one of those movies that really brings you into it. And when I saw it in theaters, I was very high. And it really, accentuated seeing it and that experience.
I was going to make a joke while watching this movie. I was like, I wonder if I should joke about whether or not I should be high watching this movie, or whether or not people should be high watching this movie. So the fact that you were the first time you watched it for
Yes.
me, that was awesome.
I was indeed. Yeah, I went with my buddies, went with my friend Andrew and my buddy Aaron, and we went to the ArcLight on Sunset Boulevard. Rest in peace to the ArcLight. One of the best, greatest theaters on the planet. It's just a trip of a film because it takes place over the course of 3 separate centuries, and it's a little difficult to explain without kind of giving the story away. But what I will say is that we start in the time of the conquistadors, we go to modern day, and then we go into space, into Xibalba, which we will talk about a little bit later as to what Xibalba is and the significance of Xibalba. So the Fountain starts out with a book being written, and it talks about the Fountain of Youth, and we're in a Mayan jungle. And that is always very captivating to me because I am a big fan of the Mayan culture and the Mayan history. Several years ago, I was actually in Chichen Itza, and it was just mind-boggling, and I was there with a tour guide that was Mayan, and he was incredibly knowledgeable, and I was like, hey man, I don't know if you like movies or not, but there's a movie called The Fountain where they talk about Xibalba and, going into stars to be reborn after the stars die, and he was telling us a similar story. So The Fountain, this film, goes along the lines of the Mayan culture, with the Tree of Life being guarded by a flaming sword. And then there's the second portion where Hugh Jackman's character is trying to find a cure for tumor growth. And then the third portion is him on his way to being reborn, essentially. So it's got some of the most insane visuals because it's just, and the gold and the cinematography and the use of lighting is really, really awesome, in my opinion. I've always liked the way that Aronofsky lights his films, especially Pi, his first black and white, to Requiem for a Dream, to then The Fountain, Black Swan, The Wrestler. So I am a big Darren Aronofsky fan. Oh, Mother.
I was wondering if you're going to bring up Mother. I know of, I think, 2 people who have seen that movie.
I actually did go to see Mother in theaters with a Q&A after with Darren Aronofsky at the ArcLight in the Dome. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I went with my friend Angie, and when it ended, she looked at me, she goes, what the fuck did we just watch?
Exactly. Exactly.
And then Darren Aronofsky did his best to explain it. For what it was, I didn't hate Mother. But The Fountain is scored by Clint Mansell, who has scored most of Aronofsky's films. And it is the score is played by the Kronos Quartet and also the band Mogwai. And the soundtrack is as haunting as some of the images in the movie. So I'm curious to hear your opinion on it. It's on my top 5 since I've seen it.
Really?
Yeah, the way that it goes into death and rebirth and some, a version of reincarnation is something that I always have been extremely fascinated with. So it really hooked me in almost immediately, like I said, when it's the Mayan culture starting out. I was like, oh, all right, here we go.
Yes. Well, it's funny you talked about the score. I love the score, and this is the first movie we've talked about so far that it's not about the soundtrack, it's actually about the composer's score that we really loved, and agree the score really helps this movie. And in fact, I really enjoy watching movies with subtitles in them because I've found that I actually pick up a lot more of the dialogue. I don't miss anything. I'm a little more invested in the film, and it just helps. I've really started enjoying that in the last year or two. And
nice.
I loved in the very, very beginning when he's climbing up the stairs and that music comes up for the very first time and it fades in. It's just like very, very big. And the subtitle says epic rhythmic music plays. I was like, yeah, that's a pretty good descriptor, actually.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You watch the subtitles of the movies. I thought you were saying like you liked watching foreign films recently.
Oh.
You like, I see. Now I got it.
Yeah, subtitles. And
epic rhythmic music. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, that's some good fucking tunes.
This movie, just to dive in a little bit deeper, this is a movie that is not for the casual observer.
Definitely not.
You need to be paying attention the entire time. And this is for someone who enjoys thinking about the movies that they watch. This is for someone who is in the mindset, or just when you're in the mood, I should say, for sitting down and really actively participating in your movie experience, because this is not a popcorn movie. I do like this movie in a lot of ways. I love what it's trying to do. I love what Darren Aronofsky is trying to do with it. I think it's a very grand plan that he has. It also gives me an existential crisis every single time I watch it.
No, it's interesting that you say that, because I don't know if I have an existential one, but I have a mortality crisis every time I watch this film. And that's another reason why I cry when I watch it, because of Rachel Weisz's character and her acceptance of death. And it's as heartbreaking as it is so gorgeous. And the way that he writes some of her dialogue before she ends up going is like, I mean, my audio piece that I want to use is the story that she tells him about her Mayan guide and his father. The whole, like, when they dug his body up, his body wouldn't be there.
He said if they dug his father's body up, he would be gone. They'd planted a seed over his grave. The seed became a tree. Moses said his father became part of that tree. He grew into the wood, into the bloom. And when a sparrow ate the tree's fruit, his father flew with the birds. He said death was his father's road to awe.
Yeah, so that whole speech, like, actually, when I watched it the first time, it was powerful for sure. The second time I watched it, it was even more powerful. The third time I watched it with my parents and my sister, and my father kind of had a bit of a cry moment during that because it reminded him of his father. Aww. So the movie not only is one of my favorites, it holds a little bit more meaning because of the way that it affected, my father and my sister and my mother when we watched it. When we watched it and we talked about it afterwards, it was one of those like, yeah, that's interesting. Like, I wonder what really, are we going to go up into the cosmos in a gold ball with a tree and try and...
Okay, so...
if they haven't seen it, of course, they're like,
so yes,
what the fuck?
If you haven't seen this movie, it's this woman who has cancer in present day, and her husband, who's a scientist, who's trying to cure that cancer desperately through a lot of experiments in his lab. And this is actually a trigger warning for people. There is animal medical testing in this film.
Good point.
It's done well. I'm the type of person who 150 guys could die in a battle in a movie, and I'm like, that sucks. And then the dog dies. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, I know. Everybody goes for the animals.
Right,
always.
Exactly. So totally understand. And I thought they did a pretty good job of displaying that animal testing without me feeling very uncomfortable. So...
Good point. Yeah.
But I did want to say trigger warning for people.
I was thinking about that. Yeah, watching. I was like, ooh, this, certain people would be like, wait a minute. But
yes.
No, you're right. It looks like it's done well. And the most part, and for the people that know Darren Aronofsky, he's all about world preservation and et cetera. He's got a lot of Nat Geo shows right now that are actually really, really awesome.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. He's producing some great, like, not necessarily like Planet Earth, but nature documentaries. But they're great. They're 4K and they're beautiful. Yeah, they're on I believe Disney Plus. If I'm remembering correctly, I didn't even actually think about that much. But yeah, so along with that timeline, going to the first timeline, which is the time of the conquistadors.
Okay.
He gets sent on a mission to go actually find the Tree of Life. And she's like, when you return, I'll be your Eve, and together we will live forever. And so in a strange way, they definitely do. continue on throughout history. Like, the moment when he's looking at his arm and he's got all those ring tattoos and he's like, you pulled me through time. And it's like every situation that he was in was to save her, and it either worked out or it didn't. When he says to Ellen Burstyn's character at her funeral, death is a disease and there's a cure and I will find it. It's that of, everybody wants to find the cure for death, but it's the inevitability of life. And even the Mayan story about planting a seed over a grave and having a tree grow over the grave is, a way of living forever. And I think that is the metaphor.
And at the same time, really distilling this movie down, it is about love and a man trying to save his wife. And one of the things that I do love about this movie, so there are parts of this movie that make me very uncomfortable just because the overall themes of death and dying and mortality, which I am still uncomfortable with as a person.
Sure.
And I think you and I have had to deal with this concept a lot more acutely because you and I were both born with major heart conditions.
Right, yep.
And that's actually how we originally met when we were 12. We met at a camp for kids with heart conditions.
Yes, we did. On Catalina
Island down in LA. And so, we've had to face these very dire situations, these situations that we are dealing with our own mortality from a very young age. And so that is something that I'm still kind of uncomfortable with, and it is very present in my life in a lot of ways. And so I'm curious if that is one of the reasons why this movie speaks to you so much compared to others.
100%. Yeah,
okay.
It does. It is fully the reason why I think it affects me the way it does, because I have lost friends, in my teenage years up to now, and of course everybody has. Not to discount anybody's experiences at all. We all have lost people in our lives, but it's just the medical aspect of this movie for that one sequence of time in this movie with all the hospital stuff. So that really gets to me, and just Rachel Weisz's character and like her acceptance of it all is like one of those things that also is like, man, maybe that's how it'll be, like when
I aspire.
if we're able to actually have some sort of idea when it's coming, like her character initially does. So yeah, I think that the death aspect is very much a part of why I like it so much, and especially the whole space stuff, like going up into Xibalba and being reborn as a star is interesting, and I never had that sort of like mindset as a child, but it's very fascinating. And like I said, I like the Mayan culture and the history of Mayans. So
yes, and that also, even connecting it back to our own philosophers like Carl Sagan, the classic "We Are All Stardust." It's very much aligned, and I like how there is symmetry there, and a lot of other theories that I've read and heard about in regards to death and what happens to us. So I did think that was really beautiful, and one of the reasons I do enjoy this movie, or do hold it in high regard at least, it's definitely not a movie that I would watch on the regular. I think I've seen it maybe 3 or 4 times total since it came out in 2006.
Oh, wow.
But one of the things that I do really love about this movie is the way Rachel Weisz and Hugh Jackman convey emotion in this movie.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
You can feel his desperation, and I
100%.
absolutely respect how, whether or not it was the screenwriter or Darren's direction or Hugh Jackman's decisions around how he portrayed his character, but when you have that amount of sadness and it turns into anger, and is such a very real emotion that he played, and it was very complex, and like he lashed out at his wife even though he loves her because he was so upset and felt so helpless about everything. Yeah. And anger is so much easier to deal with than grief, right?
Yeah.
And so I have always absolutely loved their portrayal. I thought they did such a fantastic job, especially Hugh Jackman, who most people know him, purely from his time as Wolverine, but the depth he displayed, I have a lot of appreciation for.
Absolutely. My favorite yet heartbreaking scene is when he's starting to actually tattoo his wedding ring on his finger.
Oh God.
And every time for the past like 6 years that I've watched that movie, I try and watch it twice a year. It's one of those movies for me. Like if I feel like I need maybe a good cry and I just want to like be wowed and go back on that journey again. But that scene, and then when he leaves the hospital and he's just like walking and it's silent, and then he almost gets hit by that car. He's just so invested in, like, he doesn't even know where the fuck he's going. He's just like, needs to get the hell out of there. And Rachel Weisz, I think definitely the script had a lot to do with it. Another thing about the soundtrack that is my favorite part about the soundtrack is that around 2007 summertime, my buddy Aaron had hit me up that there was a free Kronos Quartet concert in the middle of downtown.
Oh.
So we ended up going, and it was the Kronos Quartet for an hour and a half, and they were finishing up the show, and the encore was about to start, and they introduced the encore, and the encore is they were about to do Death is the Road to Awe from the Fountain soundtrack, because Clint Mansell was in the fucking audience.
Oh my gosh.
So they busted out the 8-minute epic Death is the Road to Awe. After the concert, my buddy Aaron and I met Clint Mansell, and we did nothing but gush about how much we loved the Fountain soundtrack and how much we loved the Requiem for a Dream soundtrack and how much we cannot wait for his next soundtrack.
Awesome.
Which have all been pretty fantastic. Clint Mansell's he's just a fascinating musician. Fantastic composer. So yeah, soundtrack, fantastic. And beyond the soundtrack, definitely want to talk about the supporting cast of The Fountain. On top of the 2 stars, Hugh Jackman and Rachel Weisz, we have Ellen Bernstein, and those may remember her as Sarah Goldfarb from Requiem for a Dream, and several movies over the last several decades. Most notably, I'm sure you would all remember, The Exorcist. So we got that one. I'm a big fan of Ellen Burstyn. I met her very, very briefly at the Fahrenheit 9/11 premiere in New York City when I was a spectator as the stars were walking on the red carpet. And then we have Sean Patrick Thomas. I believe he was in the 90s fantastic Julia Stiles-led film Save the Last Dance. We have Ethan Suplee also. He's a big character actor. Well, he's actually not big anymore, but we might remember him as the guy from Butterfly Effect with Ashton Kutcher. He was his roommate in college. He's in Mallrats as the guy that's looking at the picture for the entire day, trying to figure out what he's looking at. He's in
The Magic
My
Eye
Name
picture,
is Earl.
right?
Yes, the Magic Eye picture,
I've
where the
never
kids
been
already
able to
pick it out.
see Magic Eyes. I'm
Me
right
neither.
there with him.
Never. Ethan Suplee, good
Wait,
stuff.
hold on. You have to tell them about the number one most memorable movie that he is in. The most memorable character that he has played is in the Remember the Titans.
Oh, that's right. He is in Remember the Titans.
He's in Remember the Titans.
I have not seen Remember the Titans in a very long time. But yeah, that's right. He's the one that starts singing, right?
Yes, and then
Yeah.
he's also in American History X as the friend.
Oh, yes, he
which is a total 180, and I was very impressed that he went from American History X to Remember the Titans, or vice versa. And
right.
Yes, and now you're right, he's not a big character actor anymore. He has lost a ton of weight and documented on social media, and it was very impressive.
Very, very. Yeah, definitely enjoy his work. Then we have Cliff Curtis. Everybody has seen Cliff Curtis in a movie or 30. He is a character actor for the longest time. I remember him most notably from Sunshine, a Danny Boyle science fiction film that I love to death. He's also in Training Day as Smiley towards the end when he's about to maybe kill Ethan Hawke's character. If you haven't seen Training Day is a fantastic film. And I just also watched Cliff Curtis and Hugh Jackman together in Reminiscence. So they were in that movie, and I watched The Fountain just a couple of days before that. So, and then we have this gentleman that's been in most of Aronofsky's films, Mark Margolis. He is in just about everything. Also, he's in Ace Ventura: Pet Detective. He is the landlord.
Wait.
He is
Ventura.
Yeah.
Yes, Satan.
You got animals in there, Ventura. And then he's in so many other movies too. He's in
Thomas Crown Affair.
Is he in Thomas Crown Affair? Oh, okay.
He's also, a lot of people would recognize him from Breaking Bad. He's Salamanca.
There it is.
The guy in the wheelchair.
Yeah. Ringing the bell.
Ringing the bell, yeah. Anybody who's seen Breaking Bad will know what we're talking about.
I actually really enjoyed Breaking Bad. So the supporting cast is great. Hugh Jackman, big time. Rachel Weisz, fantastic. Very interestingly about The Fountain is that it was on track to be shot several different times before it actually did come to fruition. And the studios put together a lot of money in Australia to build a Mayan city and spent a budget of almost $75 million, had Brad Pitt and Cate Blanchett attached as the leads, and then the film got shut down in Australia. And then 3 years later, they re-budgeted the whole thing down to a $35 million budget and got Hugh Jackman to sign on to it. And then Hugh Jackman actually recommended Rachel Weisz for the role, even though Darren Aronofsky and Rachel Weisz were at the time involved. So it's one of those movies that is very hard for a lot of people to grasp, and we went into that earlier on when talking about it. So with a $35 million budget, the U.S. gross was only $10 million.
I would believe that $32 million of that was spent on CGI.
Oh yeah, actually no. There was not as much CGI as a lot of people think, and most of the sequences when he's in Xibalba that are going on outside of him are actual chemical reactions being recorded that were recorded from petri dishes that Aronofsky did with a bunch of different dyes and stuff.
Okay, that's cool. And honestly, given that this film was made in 2006, I was highly impressed with how much all of the effects held up. The visual effects in this movie are still incredibly stunning 15 years later.
They really are. They really are killer. It's awesome. It still looks beautiful too. It really looks good. So with a budget of $35 million, it came in with a US gross of $10 million. Not great. And worldwide gross of $16 million. So let's get into one of my favorite segments that we did on episode 1, and we'll do it every now and then. We won't always do it. But I wanted to see if you could guess the highest grossing film of 2006. I'll give you the top 5, but I'm curious if you can give me the first or the second. Now, they're both Disney films.
Both Disney films, okay.
Both Disney films, yes. Your hint is Stellan Skarsgård was in it.
Stellan Skarsgård was in it. Okay. Stellan Skarsgård, who we mentioned last week because his son Bill was in my movie Atomic Blonde.
Yes.
I love him in Ronin, which actually came out in the 90s. I know that's not the top grossing film for 2006, but I did really love him in that movie. I also enjoy him in Thor and the Avengers.
Mm-hmm.
Who else is in it?
Jonathan Pryce.
Is it a live-action film?
It is actually a live-action film, yes.
Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest.
Dead Man's Chest,
Good
yes.
Lord.
Dun, 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 dun. So yeah, that was number 1. Number 2, do you want to guess it or you want me to tell you?
Yeah, why not?
All right, cool. It is the first one of a series of movies from Disney as well, and it is number 1 of 3. And your hint is Bonnie Hunt.
So Jumanji is... No, I mean, that's for reference for people.
2006? No.
No, it's a reference for people of who we're talking about. Bonnie Hunt was in Jumanji.
Yes, she was.
Okay, is this a live action film as well or animated?
No, animated.
Was it Cars?
It was Cars.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And then number 3 was X-Men Last Stand with
our
friend Hugh Jackman.
Making me guess again. I hate that movie so much. I hate X-Men.
I've seen it one time.
I despise the storyline. I think it's a terrible movie, and they traded one director who's a good director but terrible human being for another director who's a terrible director and terrible human being in Brett Ratner. I can't stand that guy. Yeah, he's disgusting.
Gotcha.
He's super gross.
There you go. Well...
Sorry.
Luckily you won't. It's fine. Luckily you won't be working with him then.
No, he's basically out of Hollywood. He doesn't do anything anymore.
Oh,
which is good.
There it is.
Which is good.
Yeah. Number 4 was Da Vinci Code. Number 5 was Superman Returns, and I did not like Superman Returns very much. But 2006 also brought us Night at the Museum, Inside Man, and The Departed, which would go on to win Best Picture.
Nice. That is a good movie year, and I love Inside Man.
That's a good flick. Definitely very good.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm glad once again, through a bit of help from my friend John, I was able to successfully navigate the guessing game.
And real quickly about The Fountain, about why maybe it fell under the radar was because of the films that I just listed that had come out that year. Those were very, very big, popular superhero year. Pirates of the Caribbean was on the second roll that year. Departed came out. Night at the Museum, family-friendly. A good amount of family-friendly movies had come out that year, and not that The Fountain isn't necessarily family-friendly.
It's absolutely not.
I was going to say, I wouldn't take my 10-year-old to it if I were to have kids. I wouldn't do that. No.
It's one of those movies that is just worth watching. Absolutely appreciate the fact that he made it. It's just not a mainstream movie. This is not a popcorn movie. This is not a movie with a linear storyline, with a clear-cut hero. There are very good reasons why it flew under the radar, but that is separate from whether or not this movie is watchable, and it absolutely is.
Indeed, yes, definitely. Again, one of my favorite films of all time.
Awesome. Indeed. Well, thanks for picking it. I enjoyed
Absolutely.
watching it.
I'm glad you did. It's funny is when it was ending, I was wiping the tears off my face, and I was like, I can't remember if V had seen this or not. And I was like, I wonder if V is going to tear it apart, because it'd been a minute since I'd watched it, and I love it all the time. But I'm like, man, it takes on a different meaning. I think every time you watch it, also just based off of where you are in your life. And
yes, I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head that you interpret it differently, you feel differently every time you watch it. So because I've only watched this a couple of times since 2006, and I can tell you that I feel very, very different about this movie now being in my 30s than I did did watching it in my 20s, and I do have more of appreciation for it, as well as I think just more of a positive outlook on it. For the first time I ever watched this, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm now really depressed and I'm having this existential crisis and I'm freaking out about dying. And whereas this time I thought it was this beautiful story that deals with some sensitive topics in a really creative way.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, great choice. Thanks so much for picking this for us. I enjoyed rewatching it.
I'm glad.
Yeah. So where can you watch The Fountain, John?
The Fountain is actually available on just about every streaming service that you can pay to rent a movie on. Apple, iTunes, Amazon, and Redbox. You can actually stream it for $2.99 on Redbox and all of those.
Okay, nice. And
or you can buy it on DVD.
John's bringing DVD back.
Yeah.
One movie at a time. It's going to be great. So now we're going to take a little bit of a turn. What we have planned is picking movies that complement each other in some way, be it very similar themes or genres. And now this week we've picked movies that shared an actor or actress. And for this week it's Rachel Weisz, who is a favorite of both of ours. And so I actually picked Constantine, which in some ways deals with the more expansive idea of death, because it's very much centered on heaven and hell and, God and Satan versus death itself, and instead focuses a little bit on the bigger players of the whole situation.
Absolutely. Yeah. I haven't seen Constantine actually since theaters, so I was actually very excited. Yeah, I was very excited to see this movie again, because it was one of those movies that when I first watched it, I don't know if this happens with you, but there are times when you watch a movie that you liked, and that whenever you want to revisit it, you're like, you know what? I think I remember that entire movie, so I'll watch it another time. And that was me with Constantine. Like, I remembered it from beginning to end, and not like word for word, but like the key points.
Yes.
And so watching it again and actually getting into the dialogue, because again I saw it in theaters and it was a very good experience when I saw it in theaters. I just didn't see it since, and so when you picked it, I was very excited because I have been actually wanting to watch it for the last few years, but every time I go to revisit it on a streamer, I'm like, I remember it, so I'll watch it another time. So now in a way I had to watch it, and that's totally fine because I love when I have to watch movies. So yeah, I was very excited that you picked Constantine with Keanu Reeves and Rachel Weisz.
Well, that's awesome. I'm so glad to make you revisit a movie 17 years later. This came out in 2005, a year before yours.
My gosh.
Yes. And so Constantine happens to be I didn't do this on purpose, but happens to be another movie based on a comic book this week. This comic book was created in 1988 by Alan Moore. He's very recognizable for not only people who are big comic and graphic novel fans, but also movie watchers too, because a lot of his work has been turned into movies. Watchmen, V for Vendetta, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, From Hell. All of those are his. Now, the funny thing is about this movie, and I'll get into this just tidbit now because I'm on the topic, but following all of this negative experience that he had in From Hell and League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which is famously known for killing Sean Connery's career.
Oh yeah, very unfortunate.
Yeah, he didn't do another movie after that. Moore decided to reject all money and credit from Hollywood and actually took all of the royalties he would have gotten and gave it to his other co-creators, and specifically the person who did the artistry for all of the comic books for Hellblazer.
Oh wow.
I thought was pretty cool. But he's actually this very, very well-known recluse. Like, he's got this really long hair and this huge beard, and he's just kind of odd dude, and which makes sense given the kind of storylines he writes. So yeah, his like rejection of Hollywood is totally on par with his personality in general. So that makes sense.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so Constantine is about a man named John Constantine, and he is I would say, demon hunter or exorcist is a good way to put it.
Demon hunter, exorcist, yeah, that works.
Based in LA, and he is helping to fight this battle. So the premise of this universe is that God and the devil made a wager on souls and who would win, basically, the earth. And there's no direct influencing. Demons and angels cannot directly work with humans or have any direct input with them, but there's little nudging that happens kind of behind the scenes, little whispering by both sides. And so humans are kind of caught in this crossfire of this, celestial bet, as it were. And John Constantine is a guy who has this gift that he can, see and sense the both sides, and he can talk to demons and talk to angels and things like that. And he is kind of fighting the good fight on the streets, and he is also really, really cynical about doing it.
Mr. Constantine, I'd like to ask you a few questions. I know the circles you travel in, the occult, exorcisms.
What if I told you that God and the devil made a wager for the souls of all mankind? No direct contact with humans, that would be the rule. Just influence. See who would win.
Demons stay in hell, angels in heaven.
We kind of step into the middle of his life and what he's been doing. This is not an origin story, right? I mean, he has the sidekicks and he has all the weaponry, and so we step into the middle of this. And what makes this piece of his life special and why this story is really interesting is that outside of him battling demons, there is this subplot about kind of this coup that's happening, and there's treachery involved, as well as the Spear of Destiny, which is the spear that is known for killing Jesus when he's on the cross by the Roman centurion. And this is early comic books, right? I'd like to think of this as kind of those early stages that where, some of these original comic book movies that came out in the 90s and early 2000s, I'm thinking of, The Shadow and The Phantom and all these, some were good, some were terrible. But, these movies walked so Marvel could run is the way I look at it.
True. Yeah, that's a good point.
And I really, really enjoy this movie. I think it's very well done in terms of the script specifically. I think the storyline is very tight. The subplots are all working together. Everything wraps up very well and connects back to each other throughout the movie. And I actually am a huge fan of this movie, and one of my favorite quotes when somebody was reviewing this movie, Richard Corliss from Time Magazine said this is a noir action film, and I think that is a fantastic description.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I really like it too.
So this is the second Keanu Reeves, Rachel Weisz movie in existence. The first one came out in 1996. I'm turning the tables. Can you guess that film?
With Rachel Weisz?
And Keanu Reeves, they were together.
Ooh, Keanu Reeves and Rachel Weisz in 1996?
This movie did not do well in theaters.
Okay.
Happy to give you hints.
Please hint me.
All right. It also had Morgan Freeman in it.
Oh, Chain Reaction.
Nicely done.
Yes.
Yeah, you're better at this game.
Oh my gosh, I have not seen Chain Reaction in a very long time.
Probably because of Keanu Reeves' hair in that movie.
I do remember that movie, though. Wow.
Yeah, interesting premise about alternative energy and the powers that be trying to suppress it, but yeah, it just didn't do well in theaters.
That's too bad.
Yeah, so tell me what you thought about this movie. Watching it for the second time, first time in over a decade.
I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah, sweet.
Yeah, I really did. I thought it was a lot of fun. And I remember when I saw it in theaters, I thought the wings were always a really cool part of the movie. Like when certain characters show up, there are wings behind them, be it black or white for an angel or a demon. And I thought that was always really cool. And I always liked the use of Gabriel because Tilda Swinton is quite badass.
Oh, God, she's so cool. And I love the fact that they made this angel non-binary. And
right.
I thought that was such a great twist because it's true. Like, they're not human, so why would they be, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
I thought that was really creative.
And it's interesting that wasn't like, some brouhaha back in the day.
Yeah, that's nice. Probably because this film didn't. Well, it did okay, but we'll get to that later.
We will get to that. But I did. I enjoyed it. I thought the opening was pretty good. The setup with the Spear of Destiny and how it's found. I liked the introduction of John Constantine with the exorcism that he's performing with the soldier demon in the mirror. I thought that was awesome. And then, later on, a whole bunch of other badass stuff goes down on top of Rachel Weisz's character's sister having a little bit of a demise and bringing those two characters together, which I thought was a nice little segue into Rachel Weisz's character.
Yes, I really like the fact that this film grabs you immediately. Rachel Weisz plays a cop in this movie and pretty doubtful of everything and kind of reminded me of the dynamic of like Mulder and Scully. Scully was very scientific and non-believer and kind of was reminiscent of that in a little bit. So I like that piece of it. I also like the fact that this was essentially a large non-smoking ad.
Oh gosh, big time. Yeah, it was. What a chain-smoking character, my goodness gracious.
Oh my gosh. And it's interesting you said that thing about the wings, because the visual effects designer specifically made those wings the way they looked. He did not want to make these lily white angel wings, and so made them a little more bird-like. And so it's really cool that you called out the wings piece of it, because that was a deliberate decision made with the visual effects.
Very cool. Yeah, I remember the trailer for Constantine almost exactly. And, like the whole dragon's breath. It's like, where'd you get this? Oh, no, guy knows a guy. And then he blows the dragon's breath.
Yeah.
I remember that from the trailer. And then I remember the whole, I just remember a whole bunch from the trailer, but also from seeing the movie for the first time. I liked the use of Jaimin Hansu's character Midnight. I thought that was really, really neat. Mm-hmm. And the hell that is portrayed in the movie is fascinating, that it's literally where they are. It's just like a nuclear explosion in Terminator 2.
Which is funny you say that, because the look of hell was actually based on old footage of nuclear tests.
Oh, no kidding.
Specifically the sudden shockwave immediately after the blast, which is the first thing I think of is Terminator 2. So that's so funny you say that, because that is actually what it was based on. I thought it was a very creative way to depict hell. It looks fucking horrible. It absolutely looks like a hellscape.
I know. I'm sitting there looking like, it looks like it's just really windy and dusty, and I've dealt with that, but that would be an eternity of dealing with that. Very windy in hell.
I also feel like it would probably smell like they were talking about sulfur a little bit in the movie.
Right.
And I bet down in hell there's just horrible smells.
Very likely.
Sounds awful. So Jaimin Hansu's character, who I thought was such a badass, and I like the fact that he is a neutral party, very similar to Ian McShane's character of the hotelier in John Wick.
Gotcha.
He's also a neutral party. You can't fight on the grounds. Similar thing happens in Constantine, and I really like that kind of character who's kind of out of the fight but very, very instrumental in it. Jaimin Hansu is famous for Amistad. I thought he was incredible in that movie. Guardians of the Galaxy, as well as Blood Diamond, which I refuse to watch because of Leo trying to do a South African accent. Sorry.
Oh, I heard. I like Blood Diamond.
Oh gosh, I hear it's actually a pretty good movie. Jennifer Connelly's in it, but I can't watch it because that accent is way too distracting for me. But as everybody knows at this point, that is one of my pet peeves.
Yeah, it makes sense. I understand. Accents are a big pet peeve of a lot of people, and I understand where you're coming from with that. There's one thing I wanted to point out when she initially goes to speak with John Constantine for the first time after running into him, just like meet cute status out in the world, and he even references it.
Meet douche status, because he was such a dick to her. He was rude.
Really. But yeah, he even references it. He goes, "Oh, look at this kismet!" Like right when he opens the doors, she's there. So when she comes in, she's telling him about her sister that ended up killing herself. She needs some investigating as to why, and maybe he can help her because of having to do with the demonology and et cetera, et cetera. So he goes into his cabinet and he pulls out a bottle of scotch, and I'm looking at it as it's coming up closer to the camera. He puts it down on the counter, and it's one of my favorite single malt scotches, Ardbeg, out of Scotland. It is a beautiful bottle. So I unleashed that on my social media that Constantine drinks Ardbeg, and Ardbeg and Constantine just got even better.
Awesome.
Because I like this movie a lot and I love Ardbeg.
So for our listeners who don't know, John does reviews of whiskey and brown liquors, and you can tell them all.
Bourbon and scotch mostly, yes. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Check me out, Film and Barrel.
Yep, it's great. You do some fantastic videos of unboxing and tasting, and it's so funny you say that, because that bottle was picked, that type was picked because it has a very smoky flavor, and it was supposed to continue with this theme of him smoking. Like, he's so addicted to cigarettes and smoking that he has to drink a smoky liquor.
It is a very smoky, smoky scotch. It really is. It's phenomenal, though. It's so good. I love it. It's either in that sequence or a little bit later on when Angela's back in his apartment talking to him. And there's one moment at 1 hour, 3 minutes, 30 seconds where the boom mic jumps into the shot.
Oh, goes back bummer.
Up. Yeah, I was like, oh, boom mic. Oh.
Is that something you look for in movies? I know a lot of people who really love movies look for little things. Like, my little thing is coffee cups and how they're always empty.
Always empty.
And it drives me crazy, but it's something I'm always looking for.
So do you know the worst one that I've seen about the empty cups?
Well, Game of Thrones with a Starbucks cup?
Oh, no. No, the fact that it was empty. The fact that a coffee cup was empty.
No.
Oh, the wedding planner with Matthew McConaughey and Jennifer Lopez. They're hanging out after he saves her life at this like late night outdoor movie, and she hands him 2 cups, and they're both very clearly empty. Like, there's no way that she can move them that smoothly. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
anyway.
Yeah, it's one of my things in movies that I'm always kind of on the lookout for. So yeah, bummer about the boom mic. I didn't notice it. Thanks for ruining that minute.
It happens.
Yeah,
and I don't sit there looking for editing mistakes or anything like that. If I catch them, I catch them.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't sit there to try and dissect a movie. I like to get lost.
Same.
And I definitely got lost with Constantine, I will say. Like there was a good amount of moments where I'm like, my gosh, this movie's pretty intense.
It is.
Yeah, when
it's consistent. That's one of the things I really like about it. That I think it makes it a very good movie is that it's consistent. And there are a lot of movies that I'll watch that you get into. It builds this world. And then all of a sudden, something out of left field comes in, and holy shit, somebody can fly. And it's so far out of left field, it actually takes you out of the movie watching experience. When you're like, fuck, I'm watching this movie, and it's, this is weird.
Right.
This shouldn't have happened, and the fact that they do such a great job building out this universe, it's very easy to, quote unquote, suspend belief or what have you, where you're like, oh yeah, there are totally demons in this world. There, everything they built in this world was very believable, even though it deals with very supernatural themes. And I did like that about the movie.
Definitely. One of my favorite things, and I actually started thinking about the comic book very much during this sequence, and I've never looked at any of the comic book pages, but it was the scene when he gets attacked by the street demon, the bug demon, outside the gas station. Mm-hmm. It really was reminiscent of comic book status. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I like R-rated comic book stuff.
Yes.
Because it's violent, it's brutal, it's in your face.
I do think there are some very, like I said, I do like the script. I do think there are some really good lines in it. You were talking about when they meet. And yeah, they're in the street. He's talking about heaven and hell and Lucifer. And she's like, well, I don't believe in the devil. And he's like, you should. He believes in you.
He believes in you.
I love that twist on it.
It is. It's wild. Yeah. There's a lot of that dialogue that is biblical, but at the same time, it's like, ooh, like, wow.
Unique take on it.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of humanity in Constantine, and I like that. There's a lot of personal anguish that Constantine's going through, and I like, for whatever reason, when the character is dealing with that and something also bigger, like a bigger picture thing. So it was a lot of fun, and we haven't even brought it up yet, but the use of Satan in this movie, I forgot
love this character.
Hilarious he was.
Oh my
and it was
gosh.
interesting that there was almost no makeup on him. And, just the way this actor portrays Satan, and just there's a lot of little flamboyance and just the interesting, like, relaxedness of Satan. Mm-hmm. It was just very fascinating. And I always remember from the theater being like, man, what a killer fucking Satan.
Yes. And, I love the fact. So Peter Stormare is Lucifer in this movie. He is very well-known character actor. He plays the character with an unidentifiable Eastern European accent usually.
Right, yeah.
But I also loved him in Fargo.
Oh, definitely.
That must be your friend in the wood chipper there, eh?
Yeah.
And so he's been in Armageddon. He was in John Wick 2, actually. He's in the beginning of John Wick 2. Bad Boys 2. Minority Report. And...
oh, so good in Minority Report.
Yes, the doctor.
Oh my gosh, yes.
God, he was so good in that scene. And the funny thing is, you bring up about the costume, he came up with that costume himself.
Really?
They originally had planned for Lucifer to be wearing leather and some sort of spiked dog collar and be very, dark and kind of S&M-like. And he was like, let's try something else. And so he came up with this off-white linen suit and then also having this tar element to his character. And I just thought it was so fantastic and such a great take on something so legendary, right?
Right.
And the fact that you can be creative with something that is so, well-known throughout the world, I thought was very impressive.
Definitely. And I've always liked him. I think I really recognize him from very likely Armageddon, but maybe even earlier movies. Mm-hmm. But I remember first being like, this guy is hilarious.
Yeah.
And then he showed up in everything after that. Yes. He's actually in one movie that I will be picking called Spun. It's a drug cinema feature. Oh. But he's great as Satan. And then, we have
and Constantine calls him Lou, which is my favorite part.
I did notice that. Well, Lou. Yeah.
Lou, what took you so long?
Hello, John. John.
think most of the cast is pretty solid.
Yeah.
And I like that Shia LaBeouf is in it too as his taxi driver.
Yeah, it's interesting, and this is as good a time as any to have this conversation, I think. Just when we were coming up with this podcast idea, right? And you and I were going over like, how should we do it? And talking about different movies we could come up with. And in this industry, there are a lot of people who have done some pretty terrible things or have been accused of doing some pretty terrible things. Mm-hmm. And we were walking through that a little bit and just kind of exploring what that means. And, does this mean that we shouldn't bring up movies these people were in? Or, what is that line? If it was an actor, is it okay because he's just part of an ensemble? Or if it's a director, right, is that bad? Maybe we should cut it off at director because that was their movie. Or is it a, producer like Harvey Weinstein and mm-hmm. because they made money off the movie? And so I figured this was as good a time as any to talk about this touchy subject.
Sure. It's, it sucks to hear, of course, any kind of like allegations or anything like that on any actor that you have any sort of admiration for. And I've never not liked Shia LaBeouf. So I find it's a little bit of a touchy subject, I agree. And it's also tough because some of the movies you and I may pick will very likely be out of Miramax and very likely have the Harvey Weinstein name on it. Mm-hmm. It's tough to definitely do the separation of art and person, mm-hmm. but I have been able to do it in the past. And sometimes, I actually have not watched a Woody Allen movie since I watched the documentary, but there's a lot of things that I've talked to about, that documentary with several other people, and Amy and I watched it together. And it was an interesting thing to watch with Amy because she said that she definitely believed Woody Allen's stepdaughter in, mm-hmm. In the allegations and whatnot. And based off of what I saw, it was difficult not to believe her. And I only can take what my wife tells me off of her experiences and how she has also dealt with and seen other people deal with. So I just kind of trust her on that and think that maybe I shouldn't watch any more Woody Allen movies. And again, it's like Russell Crowe is some violent son of a bitch when he's drunk. He's thrown,
yes.
Granted, he's thrown, a telephone at a hotel guy, and he's definitely beaten people up out in the streets. And now, Marilyn Manson is accused with Evan Rachel Wood, and I have Marilyn Manson records. And it's, as a man too, it's definitely tough for me to be like, well, is it, for me to question it, a lot of people already think that I already am siding with,
right.
the man, and that is what it looks like. But it's just, I don't know. I really don't know.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate your perspective and the fact that, you note that, as a man, you want to listen to the women in your life tell their experiences. And I can tell you that is something that is highly appreciated by us. And, as someone who is also a survivor of sexual assault, I can tell you that it's really important to believe people, and it's incredibly important to listen. And what I really came down to, and obviously this is a touchy subject that we could talk for a long time about, mm-hmm. but when it comes to the context of what we're doing here, for me, I have come to really the realization that everybody has their own limit. Everybody mm-hmm. has their own comfort level when it has to do with interacting with someone's work.
Sure.
And so for me, I don't watch Woody Allen movies. I refuse to watch Roman Polanski movies.
Oh, okay. Sure.
And so that is my personal comfort level. Now, people can have different comfort levels, and that's okay. And we will bring that up during this podcast. And, I might pick a movie that has Armie Hammer in it, and maybe somebody won't want to watch it, and I respect
right.
that. I think of the movie as a group effort, and, if I already have the streaming service, he's not getting any money for it, right? And that's my biggest thing, is like, I'm not buying a Roman Polanski DVD,
Right.
I'm not contributing money to their work in royalties or any other form. And so that's where I settled, but I absolutely respect our listeners' comfort level and
definitely,
and what actions they prefer to take with people who have done wrong or problematic things or been accused of those things. And so understand if someone hears that Shia LaBeouf is in this movie and says, I don't want to watch it, I will respect that, and because that is their comfort level, and
sure,
and only they know that.
Absolutely. No, I'm completely on board with that as well.
And so understand that we think this topic is very important. We respect, the people who are involved in all of these situations, the victims, of course, and this is not us dismissing it or sweeping it under a rug. If we do bring up, if we happen to pick a movie that had Kevin Spacey in it, I think is a good example.
Sure.
Like, if we pick a movie later on that has Kevin Spacey in it, we're not dismissing anything. We are not saying this didn't happen. We're not saying we don't believe people. We're not saying we don't listen to them. We are saying that this is one man, part of a very large project, and we are comfortable watching that project again, but absolutely respect if some of our listeners are not.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay, great. Touchy subject,
100%.
hard to talk about, but I think it's important given the industry that we worked in and the potential that we have for picking movies like that.
For sure. 100% agree.
Okay, so tangent, but back to Constantine. You were talking about Shia LaBeouf.
I'm curious if you are a credit watcher.
I am, and I was going to bring this up.
I always watch credits, always.
Same. And I'm wondering if we should even spoil it or if we should just tell our listeners, make sure to watch till the end of the credits and then let us know through social media or email what you thought of that credit scene.
Yeah.
And we can talk about it. But yeah, I'm very curious to know what you thought.
Well, I think I like your idea of not spoiling it for anybody. I think it's a 17-year-old film, but I have a feeling that there are a lot of people that are going to revisit it now and will watch through the credits because I thought it was worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And
it was satisfying.
It is satisfying, and I also think it's a little bit open to interpretation. And so I would love if people commented on our post about the movies this week on our social media accounts, what you thought of that credit scene and what you thought it meant. I think that would be really interesting.
Definitely. Great. There wasn't any at the end of the fountain. It was just awesome credits.
Yes, and good music.
Very good music. Oh, and the music in Constantine's great. Good use of rock tunes.
They play a song by Perfect Circle, so I've sold.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Great fucking song.
Yeah, Tool and Maynard and anything he does, including a Perfect Circle, are some of my all-time favorite music, so I'm in.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that song is actually off of Mare de Gnomes.
Yeah. It is.
Yeah, it's great.
Great. Okay, so cool. I'm glad you like this movie. I want to talk a little bit more about who was in it. So like we said, Keanu Reeves, this is after the Matrix movies, the original 3, but this is before The Lake House and The Day the Earth Stood Still, and then of course way before John Wick. And then Rachel Weisz, of course, from The Mummy, The Favourites, and recently she was the mom in Black Widow. Tilda Swinton, she's the Ancient One in Doctor Strange for any Marvel fans. She's also the Queen in Narnia, which is the first time I saw her.
Oh, yeah.
She's amazing. And also The Beach.
Oh, that's right. The Beach with Danny Boyle and Leonardo DiCaprio.
Had to bring that up for you. And then I really want to point out a couple of bit actors. Gavin Rossdale's in this movie. So he is the lead singer of Bush, the rock band from the 90s, previously married to Gwen Stefani. And I thought he did a great job. He was actually a pretty good actor, and I appreciated his effort.
Yeah, I liked him too. He was definitely a bit of a creepiness going on.
Yes, but also that's like very polished. Just
very sexy.
Fitting of a demon, right?
Yeah. The slick back hair and that pinstripe suit and everything, for sure. Definitely.
And the last person I want to bring up is Pruitt Taylor Vince. So he played the priest, Keanu Reeves' friend, in this movie. Now, he has nystagmus, which is the involuntary movement of your eyes. And I really, really appreciate actors who have taken their uniqueness and harnessed it for their career in acting. I think that's very similar to like Tommy Flanagan, who was in Gladiator and Braveheart. He's the one in Sons of Anarchy. He's the one with scars on either side of his face. He wasn't an actor before that, and then he's absolutely turned that into a career. He's super cool. And then, of course, one of your favorites, Michael Kenneth Williams, who passed away last year. He was in The Wire and Lovecraft Country, and great character actor as well.
Definitely.
And these guys are great at just taking something unique about themselves and being able to turn it into, a supporting actor career. I think that's really cool. And so Pruitt Taylor Vince does this with his eyes. Like I said,
right.
He has a nystagmus. He's been in True Blood, Deadwood, Bones. And the reason why I recognize this guy immediately is because when I was a kid, I didn't have a lot of friends. I wasn't invited out to parties when I was in high school. So instead, when I was in high school, every Friday night, I would watch The X-Files with my dad. And it is one of my fondest childhood memories. I absolutely love it. I rewatch The X-Files from time to time, and it brings this wonderful feeling of nostalgia. And you know, my father really introduced me to movies as well as my love of sci-fi. So it really brings great joy to me. And this guy played a serial killer in an episode of The X-Files and scared the bejesus out of me. He was so goddamn creepy. And so that's who I always tie him back to. And I was like, oh my God, this guy's good. That's how I immediately recognized him. But he does a great job in this film. And I just like, you know, little shout outs to those supporting actors who really tie a film together and really, you know, films aren't great without them. So like highlighting them. Really glad that you enjoyed this movie. Glad that I could give you an opportunity or a reason, I guess, to watch it again after all these years. So glad it held up for you, and really glad we were able to talk about it.
Me too. I think we both nailed it with the movies this week. They're both good times.
Yes, agreed. The funny thing is that Constantine just left, I believe, HBO 2 months ago, which bummed me out. So sorry, people. My apologies. Bad timing. But you can watch it, or you can rent it similar to The Fountain on all of the places you can rent. Apple TV, YouTube, Amazon Prime. They're all $3.99. You can also watch it on Tubi for free, which we both just downloaded just for fun to test out. And not terrible. I mean, the nice thing is it's unedited, so
yes,
you still see the whole movie, but there are some ads in it, so depends on your viewing pleasure, and also if, you know, sometimes I'm really cheap and I'm like, you know what? Ads are okay right now because I don't feel like renting this movie because it was literally just on HBO. That pisses me off. The cool thing is, and this does not happen very often, but I actually have the 2-disc special edition of Constantine on DVD. So that is how I watched it and had a great time doing it.
I actually watched it on Tubi, and I think over the entire 2 hours there was maybe 5 breaks, and they were less than 3 minutes each. So
nice.
I didn't mind it.
Okay,
yeah, didn't mind it.
Good to know. And so I know we touched on it a little bit in the beginning, but we need to do Would You Watch This With Your Grandma? And so you wanted to do it for The Fountain.
Yeah, I would. I think I would show my grandmother The Fountain, just like the other ones. I need to ask you the
different question because your grandma can watch. It's a total badass and can watch everything. And so maybe I should start asking, like, would you watch this with your mother or your theoretical child or something?
Yeah, we could do that.
I wouldn't watch this with someone who doesn't enjoy movies that make them think.
Right.
Or who have trouble following movies.
Definitely not, yeah.
It's an intense movie, but there's only a small bit of violence in it, and the rest of it is tame in that realm. So it's just it's a lot.
Yeah. Definitely. I would not. My grandmother would enjoy it. I know my parents did when we watched it, but like I said, again, they always are like, "Oh yeah, that's a weird movie."
Yeah, exactly.
So it definitely it's an acquired taste of a film, just like most of Darren Aronofsky movies are. And I actually did not mention that I had a very brief moment where I met Darren Aronofsky in Manhattan several years ago. I was standing outside of a bar, and I was waiting to go into the bar, and I happened to look to my left, and I saw Darren Aronofsky, and I screamed at him. I said, "Darren Aronofsky, I'm a big fan, man. I love The Fountain." And he yelled back at me. He goes, "Thank you very much," and he kept walking. And that was my moment of meeting Darren Aronofsky in Manhattan.
That's awesome.
Would you watch Constantine with your grandmother?
That's a really great question. I have... So one of my grandmothers, yes, she was a sheriff and a badass. You'd like her. She drank whiskey.
Awesome.
But my other grandma was raised Catholic and raised my mother Catholic. And so I don't know how sensitive she would be to all that. Yeah, so people who have a little bit of sensitivity to religious iconography or religious undertones or themes, maybe they would be uncomfortable with this movie. There are definitely topics of suicide in this movie.
Yes.
And this movie is violent. This movie has several deaths in it. And like I said, it deals with some pretty heady topics like God, death, the devil, and some people might, think the way it's portrayed on this in this movie is blasphemous. Who knows? So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and so I definitely don't think it's it's rated R. It's not a kids movie, but
it is R-rated, yes.
But it's not.
It's not
either.
A hard R, but
no,
it
not
definitely
a hard R.
is.
Thank you.
It's an R. Yeah, it definitely is R-rated. I mean, it's the demons are pretty intense, and it definitely has those R-rated moments. I don't think there's. I think he might have said fuck like maybe 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
But even if those were taken out, I feel it probably still would have been R-rated at the time that it came out.
So yes, we are being very vague about this, and apologies. It is an adult movie. It's not a kids movie, but there's nothing where it's uncomfortable. Like you absolutely could have watched it with your grandma, as long as she's not like a devout Catholic who might be offended.
Right. Good point.
Great. And so, as we like to end, it is absolutely your turn. And as we like to wrap up our show, film is a form of art, and in art, every opinion is valid, except if you think
Nomadland deserved Best Picture.
That's funny. That was actually partially filmed up where I grew up, and one of my classmates from high school, her baby boy is in the movie.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Hated that movie.
Yeah, it's a divisive movie. That's true. I respect your opinion. Everybody's opinion is valid.
Of course.
All right. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. As always, please rate, review, subscribe. If, no need to feel the pressure of writing a full review. Just tapping that subscribe button, tapping that rating button is super helpful for visibility for us, for keeping this show going. And as always, you can find us at Movies You Miss Pod on all of the social media and at Gmail.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for joining us. Next week is going to be awesome.
Until then, thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.